Okay, it's 4:30 in the morning, so I figured why not do another one of these. So we're back talking with my fiance Barb, and in the last segment we talked about the ODSP program. That's the Ontario Disability Support Program, and what it's been like for you living on it as a source of income. And I want to continue on that now. Um, when your husband died, you had a mortgage on this house, yes?
Yes.
Now, the mortgage was insured, so when he died, the mortgage was paid for.
Yes.
But you've been on your own for a good amount of time. So the house, it's an older home. It's got to be close to 100 years old, and it needs repairs that you can't do and you can't afford to pay for. Yet the Ontario government has eliminated the portion of the support plan that used to cover home repairs. A portion of the program that, as far as I know, they never went to any great lengths to let people know was actually there and available.
Right.
In the last provincial budget, they said that the Ontario government announced that effective of January 2013, that the plan was going to be cancelled, and you had to have your requisition for work in by the end of June. Now, you got this notification in the mail a couple of weeks ago, and we're already into the second week of September.
Yeah.
Given the fact that...
That's handy.
Yeah, isn't it? That this much-needed program has been canceled. What are your thoughts?
Typical. Just another cutback. You know?
With no thoughts about the lives that it affects.
Exactly. I mean, 1% raise. What do you really expect? Really, I don't know the statistics on how many people on disability who actually own their own homes. But I know that I've had a lot of people say to me that I don't think a lot of people on disability own their own home. So I've always considered myself really lucky in that way, you know. It's a blessing. It's a huge blessing that was given to me. That I have a house that's fully paid for. But the blessing also carries some huge responsibilities, and when the program that's supposed to help you, in fact, doesn't help you, but hinders you, and sends you notices about programs that are being cut
that you didn't know about
months after, you know, the cutoff date. You know, that's laughable. I mean, that's why I giggle. It's not really funny, but
it's tragic is what it is.
It's tragic. Like, it's a slap in the face, really, is what it is. But what are you gonna, like, what can I do about it now? What am I going to do about it? What am I gonna do about it?
The question is, what are you going to do about it, but rather, what can you do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. Does it seem to you that the government is trying to make the average ODSP recipient's life more difficult than it needs to be? Simply by ignoring things that the people that are on the program need it to be? I mean, they spent so much money upgrading healthcare. Isn't ODSP, or shouldn't it rather be just another aspect of that healthcare system?
Well, it should be. I mean, the people that are utilizing the program are unhealthy Canadians. So it doesn't really take a genius to put two and two together.
Getting back to my first question, do you think that the government, through ignorance or indifference is making the average ODSP recipient's life much more difficult than it needs to be?
Yes.
How do you think the system could be improved?
Well, I think it needs a complete overhaul. It needs to be taken apart, and it needs a complete overhaul in the structure. Just in the way that the whole application system, the whole acceptance system for people, how they get, how they're accepted, the whole appeal system, the way that the people who are abusing the system, there's got to be more discipline so that people who are abusing the system, there's got to be more people working in the ODSP system who can actually look into that, so that people aren't getting away with it, who are actually abusing the system. If we get rid of those cases, that opens up the door so that people who are waiting to get in can actually get in. That needs to be taken care of. That's got to be done first. There's got to be some overhaul in the government. There's got to be some real eye-opening done. There's got to be somebody put in there who's got compassion, who's got understanding, who's working for us, who's working for the people on disability. That has to be done. All parts of the system have to be completely overhauled. The drug card system, the dental system, that's got to be overhauled. Everything, every little bit of it just has to be taken apart, looked at, and fixed so that it runs smoothly. 1% raise a year, not acceptable. The cutbacks that are happening, not acceptable. Making people who are already ill and in need poorer when they're already struggling, when they're ill, not acceptable. No.
So it's more like a case of kicking somebody when they're already down.
Yeah. It's just not acceptable.
Why do you think people put up with it?
They don't have a choice. There is no choice. What are you going to do?
But if enough people gathered and said to the government in a clear and unified voice that we've lived with how you've been running things, and while you can live with it, we can't, do you think they'd even listen? Do you think they'd even care?
You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. Doing these video blogs and trying to speak out and advocate for epilepsy itself. And now there's this other issue of trying to speak out and advocate for the disability system. It's all a stepping stone, you know. There's so many other things that come off everything, you know, that lead off of each other. Yeah, I think there's definitely things that could be done. There's rallies. There's, you know, that could be taken to Ottawa, perhaps. I don't know if it would do any good. Sometimes they work for some causes, sometimes they don't, right?
True. Because,
I mean, if you cry loud enough, sometimes they listen. If you make enough noise, sometimes they listen. I mean, it's persistence. If you scream loud enough. But the thing is if nobody knows what's going on, if everybody's blind to it, then nobody knows. I mean, if the rest of the population doesn't know how bad the system is, then they can't really talk about it either, can they?
well, I think in the case of protesting, governments, especially those that face protests, fairly regularly. Um, if you do a protest, I think protests would be seen by everybody else, the working classes. They'd be viewed as an annoyance.
Yeah.
And the government knows that if they were to try and put down minor sources of insurrection, that the more attention that they show to it, the more attention that they draw. But if they leave them alone, those things soon become commonplace and become background noise, and people stop paying attention. I think my personal perspective is that while the government's original mandate might have been to actually help the people, that now their only intention, it seems to have, is to keep power concentrated in their hands, especially when they've held on to it for too long and prefer to keep it that way. What do you think?
Oh, definitely.
And of course the government does what it's always done in the past. They tell people what they require of them and how they are to obey. And if they don't, their reaction is usually predictable and usually involves the police.
Yeah, I don't think protesting, I've never been a big one for protesting myself as being a way to go. I'm just sitting here trying to think of effective ways to,
Now, do you think that the government and the people that run it are so out of touch with people on disability, and that they're just so intent on their own preconceived notions that they won't allow or even acknowledge the validity of any other opinion but their own?
Well, let's face it, do you really think it's at the top of their priority list?
Well,
I don't think so. I think the government's got a lot bigger things and more important things, as they consider important things, on their plate and on their minds than Ontario Disability Support Program.
what galls me is the money that the Ontario government spent for that G8 summit. Was it last summer? And they spent millions upon billions of dollars to impress foreigners who, let's face it, don't really do anything for the people except come here and hawk their wares and, allow us to hawk our wares in their markets. And yet they talk about, how everybody has to make sacrifices for the common good. I believe Dalton McGuinty has used that expression on occasion, or something, or sentiments similar to that. And yet,
how many sacrifices has Dalton McGuinty made lately, I wonder? I mean, when's the last time that he went a month on eating Kraft dinner and tuna?
I don't even think he knows where to get Kraft dinner and tuna.
I'm just saying.
But this nonsense of the, making sacrifices for the greater good, is it your opinion that decade after decade has marched by and the only thing that this business of the common good has ever done is to produce a slow death for those that are mired in poverty?
I'd say that'd be a pretty fair assumption. I mean, I certainly don't see things getting any better. I mean, the more that I hear, the more that I read, I haven't heard anything positive. I just haven't heard anything positive that I can say, oh, well, yeah, this has been improved, or this has happened, or this has been done. I mean, if I could, I'd be putting it out there. But I mean, all I've heard is canceling this, canceling that, canceling this, canceling that, canceling. I know that they've canceled bus transportation in certain cities, from city to city, for disability patients.
So how are they supposed to get to their doctor's appointments?
Take my cab, I guess.
Not the government's problem, I suppose, is how they look at it.
I mean, I fairly can't say if they would be able to take in the cab fare and get reimbursed, because I do know that they will do that sometimes.
How many hoops do you have to jump through to get that?
It's quite a pain in the butt. When I was going back and forth to Toronto to see my surgeon after my legs were broken, they did pay for my cab fare back and forth, but it was a lot of paperwork to get that done. And so I'm thinking, if they're canceling transportation for people on disability from, to go from a city to another city, well, if they don't want to pay for their bus fare, I'm highly doubting that they would pay for their cab fare. But they might, but then again, if they did, it would be that whole story that I was talking about in the last blog of them doing that ass backward thing of, like the pill thing, where they didn't want to pay for the one pill because it was generic, but they would pay for the brand name. You know what I mean?
It's the other way around, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's cancel the bus thing because, we don't want to pay for it anymore, but we'll reimburse you for the cab fare if you want to travel back and forth. Like, they do things like that all the time. It's like they make decisions and cutbacks that they're not common sense. It's like, you wonder, it's almost like you think to yourself, are there 5-year-olds running this that are, and I'm sorry to offend any 5-year-olds out there, because I'm sure you could make better decisions, but that's the perception that I get, like, it's bus fare. Like, these people need transportation. Is it asking a freaking lot for them to be able to get back and forth from another city to another city because they can't drive themselves? Like, that's really not asking a lot, I don't think, out of a system that's supposed to help people with, some sort of disability.
Yeah, but every ruler, prospective ruler that comes down the pike offers only more of the same, yet many people still vote for them for no better reason than because they said that they were going to offer real change and that their intentions were good. But we've got hospitals, we've got hospices, we've got, people's homes, and worst of all, we've got graveyards full of people that can speak about those good intentions and those prospects of change. What do you think about that?
Listen, I'm a very positive person, and I believe the best of everything, and
I guess that's
it's just, I don't have
it's hard to stay positive in the face of such, utter disregard.
Well, when I don't hear anything really good happening, or coming out of the system in general, it's like, here, we'll do you a favor, we'll put you on the system, but we're just gonna do it so you can just scrape by. So, but you better thank us heartily because we're doing you the biggest favor in the world. So you better bend over and kiss our asses, kind of thing. But yet we're gonna just hang on a minute because every year or every 6 months we're gonna take something away or change something, or it seems like every benefit that was there is slowly being taken away, and it leads you to wonder, What else is going to be cut off? What's getting cut off next? What's getting cut off next? What's getting cut off next? And you hate to sound ungrateful, because I'm all about being grateful. And God, I hate to sound negative, but I've had a whole lot of anger lately towards some of the things that I've heard about, just the struggles that some people have had with the system, and it's just not right. People should not have to struggle when they're sick. Should not have to struggle when they're sick. That's why the system is there. And if there's people abusing it, there should be a system in place. Go find them and kick their butts out. Get them out of there.
It's almost like they're holding a knife to your throat, isn't it? I don't mean like you individually. I mean anybody that's on the disability system. It's like they're holding a knife, metaphorically speaking, to your collective throats and dictating that as an ODSP recipient that you don't have the same rights and privileges of other members of that society. And yet no society can be more important than the people that populate it. If you do that, then any foolish notion that enters into the collective mind of that society becomes more important than the lives of the people. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. What do you think? Because there does seem to be this prevailing notion that one person dead, or even 10 people dead, is a tragedy, but 100 or more is just a statistic. Especially if you're poor. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it needs to be cleaned up, and the only way it's going to be cleaned up is if the whole system gets changed, like I said before, and information gets spread around to people who aren't on the system, and because I don't think anybody really has a clue. Unless they're on the system, they don't know. They have misconceived perceptions of what it's like to be on the system. And right, some of them are fair, because like I said, there's a lot of people that are on the system and use it unfairly. I know this. I've seen it myself. So some of the stigmas they're fair. But there's a lot of us that are on the system that need to be on the system. So people like myself, we don't need to be judged, and it's not appreciated, and it's not respectful. And that is one of the very worst parts of having a disability, is that whole stigma that goes with being on the system. People look at you like you're dirty almost. And maybe that plays into it too. I don't know. I don't know. And maybe that's the way that they want it. That's a segregated line. I mean, I don't know. I can't fully understand it myself. I shouldn't use the word segregation, I guess. Maybe that's not the proper word.
But isn't that what it is? I mean, I believe George Carlin said it best when he implied that one of the most effective tools a government has is using fear. He said that I'll paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote. You said, "The rich people do none of the work, get all of the money, and pay little of the taxes. The working classes do all of the work and pay all of the taxes, and the poor are just there. They're just there to frighten the working classes to make sure they keep showing up for those jobs. So they'll show up, punch in, put up with crap, and punch out, and come back and do it all again the next day." I think that's an accurate assessment, an accurate perspective.
George Carlin's a very wise man.
It's one of my heroes.
I do think that is, unfortunately, fairly wise perception. I was just thinking, another thing, too, that just was popping into my head was, another thing that's difficult with disability is, a lot of the times if you need stuff, even though disability will cover it, they make you pay for it up front. And it's a darn struggle sometimes to come up with that money up front. I mean, even though they'll reimburse you for it,
Yeah.
you have to come up. And just to give you an example, when I broke my legs, I needed those air caps, and they were $387 each. So I had to come up with that money. That was the bill they sent me from the hospital in Toronto.
So that's $700.
Roughly, yeah. So they sent me a bill from the hospital in Toronto, and I opened it and I freaked out. And I phoned them and I said, "I can't pay for this. I'm on disability." Well, it doesn't matter. Disability doesn't cover it. OHIP doesn't cover it. You have to pay for it. And I said, "Well, I'm going to have to make payments or something." "No, you can't do that. You have to pay us by the end of the month or we're going to put you in collections." So, me being a little bit stubborn, a little bit spunky, I made a huge fuss about it. And I think they cleared the debt somehow. I don't know how I got out of it, but I made enough of a fuss and a stink about it that the hospital eventually covered it for me. But, yeah, it's stuff like that. People don't realize, like the general public wouldn't realize. Stuff like that is very that's very stressful.
And it's very stupid in a way. I mean, you know, if you could afford to pay for it up front, you wouldn't be on disability in the first place. Because you'd have money.
Right.
It's just like the same nonsense that banks do, that I remember seeing. I was never a big Seinfeld fan, but I did remember seeing him do this either on the show or in a stand-up, where he said that a bank is a place that will lend you money if you don't need any. And he likened that to going to a restaurant and asking for some food, and then they say, "Well, do you have any food?" "No, that's why I came in." "Well, you can't have any of ours." Like, seriously, if you could afford to pay for that up front, why would I even need you? If I could afford to pay for my medicine and my health care, I wouldn't need you. That's the part that they don't get. And I think, quite frankly, they don't care. That's the whole bottom line, is that none of the people that work for the disability office have ever been on disability. It's like, you know, dealing with the people at the unemployment office. The problem with dealing with people at the unemployment office is that they all have jobs. You know, it's the same thing, just, you know, just a different focus. Okay, speaking of the government now, as an ODSP recipient, you have a caseworker. When was the last time you actually had a meeting with your caseworker where he would sit down and say, "How are things going, Barb?"
I don't think I've ever had a meeting. Like, I had talked to her on the phone, but I don't think I've actually had a meeting with...
Well, you're one step above me, because...
3 years, I think maybe when my husband passed away, I had to go in because there was a lot of changes and stuff. So, I guess maybe 3.5, 4 years ago. But I have spoken on the phone with her a few times.
Still makes you one up than me, because after I came on the system, I never even met my caseworker once. I have no idea if my caseworker is a man or a woman. I've never heard from this person. I've never received a phone call from this person. Nothing. If I had to contact my caseworker, I would have no idea who this person is. And I don't really know what a caseworker does, but it seems to me that there could be a time, even if it's just once a year, where they could contact you and say, how are things going? Have there been any changes, any new developments in your life? I don't know how time effective that would be. Because like I said, I don't really know what a caseworker does.
Well, if they see a problem in your paperwork or something, don't worry, you'll hear from them.
So basically, it's just, I guess, another form of indifference by the system towards you.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I have a really good caseworker.
What's his name?
Her name, I think, is, I don't want to give her name out, but I do have a really good caseworker.
And you know this person's name?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you were two up on me.
And I've always said, you know, I've heard a lot of people complain. A lot of people complain about their caseworkers, and I've always said, you know what, I must have been the only person that locked out, because
I'd complain about mine if I knew who they were.
I do have a really good caseworker. I mean, I don't speak with her regularly, but if I have questions or anything, she does call me back right away, like within the next day or so. So, you know, there are some good things about the system too as well.
Well, true.
That, I mean, I know they have some good programs for families and for winter clothing allowances for children and stuff like that. I'm not very knowledgeable on that because I don't have like children, but I do know that I get the little pamphlets and stuff with my check. So
now, speaking of allowances, I was looking at your statement, and forgive me because I'm going to actually mention an amount, but I noticed that the amount that they gave you for a housing allowance is $450. If you had to rent an apartment, what kind of apartment do you think you could get for $450 a month?
And here?
Yeah. In any medium to large city in Ontario.
Honestly, I wouldn't know because I haven't rented for so long, but I'm thinking probably like you'd be renting out like a room out of the house probably, wouldn't you? Or like a half a house? No, probably not even half a house. I don't know.
No, because I think that I know people that have rented out rooms in their houses before to students and that, and that's pretty much what they charge, between $400 to $450 a month. If you're only getting, say, $700 or $800 a month, that's more than half. It's more than half of your monthly income just going to pay rent. And yet, it seems to me that the administrators of the program are out of touch with the realities of the situation of what real life is like.
Well, it brings up my comment from before that I don't think that it's really... I don't think they adjust your checks. Like, I don't think they've adjusted in the last little while to the cost of living. I mean, the cost of living has gone up, obviously, in the last while. Like,
certainly more than 1% a year.
Yeah, like, I mean, as far as groceries and gas and everything.
Not to mention electricity, water,
Right.
gas.
That's right. So.
And disability or not, when you have your own home, you still have to pay property taxes.
Yeah.
And if you have your own home, but it's not paid off for, you still have to make that mortgage payment. I'm pretty sure the bank won't give you any special dispensation
No.
because you're on disability. And the first thing disability will tell you is sell your house, live off the money that you get, and then when you run out of it, call us.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be very fair. Now, just to round up this segment before my battery dies, if you could sum it up in one or two sentences, if you could talk to somebody who had the authority and the ability to make real and positive changes in the system, what would you tell them to do?
They need to overhaul the whole system. Fix every area of it. Update it to this time frame, to the cost of living. Make it logical, make it so that it's commonsensical. Allow people to have proper medication treatment, like medications covered. Allow people to have...
Make more and varied treatments and medications available.
Yeah, and allow people to...
Not just the cheapest.
Yes, and not just to have... Not to go hog wild on their teeth, but to at least have some flexibility in there, so if someone's got, a rotting tooth or something, they can at least have it fixed. Maybe carry over into the next year and use a bit of it, something like that. Adjust to the cost of living, maybe. Adjust like everybody's checks to the cost of living, and put some people, or even, I don't want to say hire some more people, but utilize some of their staff to look into all the cases that are being abused by people who are misusing the system. Get them out and look at all the appeals and get the people that desperately need it in.
Well said.
And that would be my best advice.
Well, that rounds it up for this section. I think I got some more questions for our next time, which will involve social media.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Barb.
Thank you.
Bye.